Please welcome the cast of Listen to Your Mother North Jersey 2023. Danielle Alfonzo Walsman is a Listen to Your Mother super fan. Danielle is solely responsible for filling half of our seats year to year, never imagining that one day she would not only be on our stage, but be the first story of the year. Please welcome Danielle reading Woman Seeking Woman. It was hard for me to believe, but I was in my early 40s and back on the apps looking for that special someone, again. I posted on multiple sites and prayed to find the match that would truly last. Middle-aged professional white female seeking female, non-smoker. Must be fun, energetic, and good in the kitchen. I'm clear about what I want, and I'm looking for someone who can take direction or call the shots as the situation requires. I am someone you can rely on, and I need you to be too. Serious inquiries only. I'm done playing games and willing to pay you, your place or mine. Do you know how much easier my life would have been if this were an ad for sex instead of another attempt to find an after-school babysitter for my 3 kids? Ladies, what they say about working motherhood is true. It blows. But not because of the juggle. Thank God for the chance to juggle both a meaningful and demanding career and a house full of children that on a typical day operates like a raging dumpster fire. The impossible task of working motherhood is finding the perfect stand-in for mom while she's at work. Someone who will love and protect your babies just as you would, but be savvy enough to not be devoured by them, as kids, like sharks, can smell fear. I didn't always struggle. My family spent 9 years in the warm embrace of Mona, our full-time nanny who loved my children from birth and as much as my husband and I did, but with so much more patience. She potty trained all 3 of our boys and would stand there rubbing my one son's back as he pooped because she told me he really liked that. She pushed my other son in a stroller to kindergarten and Little League because he didn't want to walk. She spoon-fed my youngest to an age where he could read the sign I hung in the dining room that read, "No more spoon-feeding Murphy." And she spoiled me even worse than she spoiled them. She would anticipate my every need and say sweet things like, "Lady, you are not easy." She showed me so much love and support every single day that it was like she was my mother, only nice. I knew how good I had it, but I had no idea what it would be like once my youngest started school and we had to enter the wild west of afternoon sitters. Can we just agree that 3 to 6 p.m. is a brutal time of day to be in the presence of school-aged children? They're tired and cranky. They want to play with their friends, but they need to do their homework. They have to eat their dinner, but they don't want to eat their dinner. And don't be late for all those activities. Even when they say, "I can't find my cleats, and I told Colin you'd give him a ride to practice, but I don't know where he lives." No wonder I lasted so long in a job that didn't get me home before 7. Now, try to find someone who didn't know and love your kids as adorable babies, but is willing to deal with all that for 3 hours of pay per day. In my experience, friends, this is not a time to be super picky. I once hired a sitter named Kayla over text in September based on a recommendation from a friend. I first met Kayla in person in December. And purely by coincidence, she was pulling out of the driveway as I was pulling in. I stopped. I rolled down my window and said, "You must be Taylor. I hear the kids really liked you. Good night now." But then she graduated college and moved back to South Carolina. We tried No Sitter for a while and nearly filmed the sequel to Lord of the Flies. Let me tell you, I didn't need a watch to know when it was 3:15 because my work phone would blow up like I was running a radio contest. For a few glorious years, we had Aubrey. What a gem. 20-something, slowly working on her undergrad degree. Slow down, Aubrey, no hurry. She was sweet, fun, patient, an amazing cook. The kids loved her. My husband and I loved her. Now, we are a family that never has the right groceries in the house, but Aubrey could breeze in at 3:30 and make a delicious dinner out of dust and an ice cube and get everyone where they needed to be on time and with a smile. So many friends at work would say to me, "I don't know how you do it," and I still don't know how she did it. After one particularly long day at work, I was feeling so thankful as I went upstairs so tired and discovered a pile of my laundry that she had folded, which was not part of her job. I texted her right then, "Thank you again for all that you do for us. You are babysitting goals, and I hope the universe sends you a sitter just like you one day." She responded, "About that, I'm pregnant." Fuck. And that's how we lost Aubrey, and I was back on the sites. Finding the right sitter and dodging the wrong ones is some of the hardest work that you'll do as a mom. Someone responsible and warm, with a car that starts, who enjoys cooking, conflict resolution, and is willing to deal with all your shit, plus your sassy teen who cannot poop in less than 40 minutes and consistently remembers that he has to poop 5 minutes before he needs to be somewhere. That struggle is what to expect when you're expecting to still work. My kids are older now, and I'm no longer on the prowl for a sitter, but I will say this about those years. The many babysitters I hired to watch my kids expanded the circle of people who love them and who continue to cheer their every milestone, even now, years later. I learned of my son's first girlfriend because the crossing guard told my babysitter. This is what you pay for. I laughed with these women, commiserated with them, and thanked God for their place in our family because a good sitter is a working mother's jackpot. And one day, if you're really lucky, you'll get a chance to admire the 3 fine boys they helped you raise and publicly thank these women for a job very well done.
Unbeknownst to Danielle, I was actually also one of her sitters for about 3 months, and I think I left my phone charger there. If you could check under the sofa, that'd be great. Toni Teixeira has devoted much of her life to mental health care, both as an advocate and a psychotherapist in her private practice, Strong at the Core Counseling. We're very happy she was able to take a mental health care break of her own to put pen to paper in her story, Miracle Table.
Several years ago, it was bulk pickup time, and I threw away the preschool table. We had all outgrown it. For 13 years, that table had been one of the most important pieces of furniture in my house. My son Jack sat at that table, with me, with therapists, for tens of thousands of hours. But now, that table and those chairs were too small for his gangly 15-year-old arms and legs. He'd grown taller than me, and his dad. He didn't fit at that table anymore, in so many ways. Yet, saying goodbye to our little table was surprisingly difficult for me. I guess I'd taken for granted what it had represented. A seat at that table was a seat at the cusp of possibility. Possibility I wasn't yet ready to release. The possibility that my son, while sitting at that table, would learn something exciting or have an unexpected breakthrough, and that he and his world, our world, would change forever. Until he was about 15 months old, Jack seemed to be developing normally, albeit a little behind the curve. He said bye-bye, he squealed with delight at passing cars. He seemed typical, like his big sister. But around 18 months, something changed. His words vanished, his squeals of delight disappeared. There were nights I crawled into bed and sobbed. This wasn't supposed to happen, the thought repeating over and over in my head. I saw other special needs moms embrace their role, strong and brave, but I wanted to run away. I loved my child, but hated the autism that stole him from me. I suppose I never really thought he would stop having autism. But in the early days of his diagnosis, I read about children being cured and prayed he might be one of those miracles. I put my energy into creating an exceptional program for him at home. I read all the books and articles. I hired coordinators and trained therapists. We went to speech, occupational, and physical therapy appointments like clockwork. For months, I hoped Jack would identify an object or learn a new skill, and at one point it looked like he's beginning to make a breakthrough. But suddenly, it all stopped, and new skills were lost. Jack had suffered a second regression. The lights went out and never came back on again. Those were dark days for me. I fell apart. My marriage fell apart. The table came with us to my new home, and with it, my silent wish and secret desire. This little boy could still become someone else. I can admit that to myself now. It was a misguided prayer. It was a wish that the child I had in front of me would be replaced by the child I thought I was supposed to have. This is not an easy thing for a mother to admit. And of course, who would not want their autistic child to get better? But my wishing for a normal future often took me away from moments of enjoying Jack and being truly present with him and my other kids. I spent so much time hoping for a miracle, I barely recognized the miracle right in front of me. Jack has grown a lot through the years, but much of his learning and ours did not happen at that table. Jack does not speak, but tries unbelievably hard to communicate and uses his iPad to let us know what he wants. He can't tie his shoes, but he can find them in the house and put them on when he knows we're ready to go out. He can't tell me the day of the week, but somehow he knows the day his father's coming and waits by the window for him. None of these things were learned at the table. He learned them in the world, just being with us. Jack is 23 years old now. He is smart and loves with his whole heart. Every therapist, teacher, and person we have met through the years has been touched by him in some way, and his love works through them and is shared with other people. He has touched more lives than I can imagine, you now included. In the beginning, I thought my life would be better if Jack didn't have autism, but I don't think that anymore. I would have missed out on knowing him, loving him, protecting him, and believing in him. He has changed me for the better, and it has all happened just the way it was supposed to. Jack is a miracle, but he is not the only miracle. Falling in love with my little boy, who will always have autism, allowed the little boy of my prayers, the fantasy boy without autism, to retreat into the shadows. Jack is mine, and I'm fiercely in love with him, all of him. Very soon, after I put the table and chairs out to the curb, I watched a young man haul it away and wondered, what new miracles await the next family that takes a seat at that table?
Thea Cogan-Drew is a physician assistant and teaches physician assistant studies at Rutgers. Thea was also the breakout star of the Barrington Elementary School's 1980 production of I Remember Mama, where she played the titular role of Mama. Today, she brings together her experiences in the sciences and as a mama in her story, Side Effects.
I woke from surgery confused. I recognized my husband, Dan, who was teary and holding my hand. "He's fine," he whispered. "Who?" I asked. "Our baby," he said. "What baby?" I said. And I started to cry. We'd been so excited to get pregnant, and I'd had a lucky, uneventful 9 months with little stress and no complications. We were living in Massachusetts at the time, and my OBGYN was part of a well-known Harvard teaching hospital. I was comforted during the tour, seeing the birthing room, the big round yoga balls, the recovery rooms. Even the brief swing past the C-section suites felt exciting and reassuring. When my water suddenly broke after a bumpy bus ride, we headed over to the hospital incredibly excited. My whole family showed up to pace the waiting room, ready to gift us Red Sox onesies. After many hours without changes, I requested an epidural. Expecting total relief, I was surprised when the effects took hold solely on the left side of my body. Every agonizing contraction still felt as though I was being split in half from top to bottom for hours. Still no baby. After a failed vacuum delivery attempt, and now with a low fever, I earned the diagnosis of failure to progress, and we talked C-section. Then came some abnormalities in the fetal heart monitor, and we stopped talking and urgently rolled next door to those surgery suites. Dan swears the anesthesiologist used a plastic cocktail sword to test for numbness. I could still feel pinpricks in my thighs. My OB was saying, "We need to get this baby out." So anesthesia administered ketamine, a psychedelic sometimes used in these kinds of cases, and morphine. While descending into the K-hole, the surgical lights became the long white hallway in the Matrix. And there was Keanu Reeves and Lawrence Fishburne and Carrie Ann Moss. We four had important business to attend to. So I said goodbye to my husband and joined them. When I emerged later, I had no memory of why I was in the hospital. I didn't recognize my doctor. I didn't even remember that I'd been pregnant. Thankfully, I knew my husband, but the rest of my memory was fleeting. I'd stop crying, then look at Dan confused. "It's okay," Dan would say. "He's fine." "Who?" "Our baby," Dan would say. "What baby?" I'd ask. A few minutes would pass and the conversation would repeat. "Our baby," Dan would say. "What baby?" Eventually, we were both crying. But he was fine. He was more than fine. He was beautiful, and we were smitten. My memory returned within the hour, and we were parents. A few years later, I became pregnant again. I was in graduate school to become a physician assistant. I felt I had more knowledge and perhaps power in the situation, and this was comforting. I was determined to have a vaginal delivery. No drugs, no epidural, no surgery. However, my midwife, a midwife this time, informed me that our boy was in breech position. Feet first is not an arrangement well suited for vaginal delivery. Despite my best efforts to change his stance, using prescribed movements and gentle coaxing, he remained firmly planted in this position. Of note, this exactly describes our relationship dynamic to this day. Dan and I tried to embrace the scheduled C-section. My parents came to stay with Big Brother. We cleaned the house. I finished that pesky thesis I was writing. More importantly, I met with anesthesia in advance. No psychedelic drugs, please. Check. We planned for straightforward spinal anesthesia. I could be conscious for the delivery. Our scheduled date came, and we were as excited as two people heading into an OR suite can be. Things started out well, but midway through my C-section, I developed severe nausea and vomiting. They finished the procedure and sent me to recovery, where the vomiting persisted, and I started profusely sweating, dripping, like going for a run in a rainforest at noontime. And then I became cold and clammy. The lowest temperature the baffled nurses could obtain was 95 degrees, and they thought their thermometers were broken. My retching continued through several types of anti-nausea medicines and seemed to last forever. I couldn't greet this new baby boy with his bright, chubby cheeks. I tried to hold him, but I was afraid I'd throw up on him. The anesthesia team was similarly baffled until they found a case report on hypothermia, intractable vomiting, and profuse sweating. It was a rare reaction to morphine in the spinal anesthesia. The solution, I would basically have to wait it out. Hours later, my temperature stabilized, I stopped vomiting, and the three of us wheeled off to our hospital room. Dan leaned in and gently brushed back my damp hair, kissed my forehead, and said, "At least you get to remember everything this term." In times of stress, my husband says, "One day we'll look back on this and laugh." Time, distance, and perspective have given me that privilege. In the moment, though, these experiences rocked me. There's shame and guilt among mothers who don't push out that melon-sized head, drug-free and humming a song. For me, adjusting to being a new mother and then a mom of two while reconciling the incredibly medicalized birth experiences was really challenging. I wanted to rest and bond and learn to breastfeed and not wonder what went wrong with me and why my body failed in this most natural process. I am fortunate, in more ways than I speak of today, to have survived these experiences and have two healthy children. I also have a family and community of friends who listen to my stories, sometimes over and over, and the experiences became just this, stories. Each boy of mine has a unique birth story, and we recount them on birthdays, with full details of the vomiting or the amnesia pad. These tales are added to all the parenting experiences of every day and over the years, the real work of being a mother. These are my stories of how it all began.
I love that Thea's K-hole fantasy includes Keanu Reeves. I think we should all take a moment and imagine who would be in your K-hole in fantasy. Anyone think of Carol Channing like I did? No? Just me. Lauren Rutkin has dedicated herself to service to her family, her community, nonprofit organizations, and currently to a philanthropic foundation where she manages volunteer and diversity, equity, and inclusion programming. Today, she's serving our Listen to Your Mother community by sharing her story, The Rut Hut.
Some days, I feel like I am a walking fucking miracle. As kids in the summer, my sister and I walked barefoot in bathing suits, swimming all day, riding bikes carefree. Dreamy, right? It only occurred to me when I became a parent myself.
But I was completely unattended, and not in the, 70s kind of way. I mean, for real. My mother had no idea where I was or what I was doing. How could she? While we were running free, my mother spent her days alone in her dark bedroom, and the smell of her cigarettes permeated our home. My parents had divorced, after which Dad became quite the serial dater, and Mom, she stayed in her room. If she wasn't at work or driving us somewhere, that's where she was. Despite her isolation, my mom was great at her job outside the home. She was a social worker in the toughest of cities, fighting for the underserved. Ironically, she could not translate that gift to her children, who were silently screaming, "Hello, see me, I'm here, notice me." But she couldn't. She was locked in her room, crying and sobbing, "Don't leave me," and we were forced to fake fever so we wouldn't leave to go visit our father. Left without a choice, my sister and I became her caregiver. Dad had gone on to marry twice more, gifting me 2 back-to-back stepmothers, 1 subsequent half-sister, and 2 step-siblings. And so it was perhaps out of loneliness or desperation or both, and her deep commitment to the Reagan-era's Head Start program, my agoraphobic mother surprised all of us by expanding our family. She began by becoming a foster parent to many, and eventually adopted 2 little girls, Kiki and Crystal. As I matured, my mother withdrew from me even more. Leaving us unattended as teenagers was a whole different story. We never had to worry about my mother coming downstairs. And as a result, the Rutkin girls became known for our Rut Hut, as the kids dubbed our home. My mother was locked in her room, and the parties raged downstairs. I wonder how many kids lost their virginity in my house. How many lines of Coke saw my bathroom counter? I was 16. But in the light of the morning, my mother was always better able to emerge from her room, not as a parent, but as kind of a peer. She'd sit around the table, smoking her cigs, drinking coffee, talking about sex with her friends, my friends, who had spent the night ignoring the mess around her. It wasn't until I graduated and left my house that the diagnoses started pouring in. Bipolar, manic depression, anxiety, agoraphobia, addiction. Oxy entered the scene. And while I was figuring out how to be an adult, my mother was forced out of her dark room and into the bright lights of hospitals and psych wards. Once her mental illness had been diagnosed and medicated, she was actually able to exist in ways that she hadn't been able to when I was a child. She began to function and to leave her room even to parent. Kiki and Crystal were still little girls. She had time to turn things around. She saved the girls from a very different life, and in turn, they saved her life in equally profound ways. And all the while, I was learning how to be a grown-up on my own. I moved into college. She dropped me off and didn't return until 4 years later on graduation day. I traveled abroad, spent my 20s living in different cities, and she never visited. I fell in love, got engaged, went wedding dress shopping, and she wasn't there. My kids were born, and she showed up weeks later. My mom's best intentions to stay healthy were clouded by her demons. She became addicted to a cocktail of meds: Oxy, Xanax, Klonopin, strangely Diet Coke, laxatives, combined with meds treating her diagnoses. Her agoraphobia and depression alternating, dormant or on full display, depending on the day and depending on the cocktail. Kiki and Crystal growing up around her. The last 10 years of my mom's life was a revolving door of hospitals and psych wards and rehab facilities. The memories of watching her detox, strapped to bed rails, crying out like a newborn haunt me. Occasionally, she'd come out on the other side as her best self, only for the demons to eventually return.
My mother died in April of 2020, a month into the pandemic. She died at 77, but literally looked 110. On her last days, the four of us daughters met in PPE head to toe to say goodbye outside while she was transported from the hospital to hospice. In a brief moment of recognition, she lifted her head and said, "All my girls are here." And there we all were. All four of us girls, now all adults, all functional, all walking miracles, saying goodbye to our mom. My final goodbye was over FaceTime. My adult self has empathy for my mother in a way that my girlhood self could not. I know now that it isn't possible to take care of those around you when you can't take care of yourself. But the 8-year-old in me just misses the mom and wishes I could have had that fairy tale ending. Aren't we supposed to take the oxygen for ourselves before we tend to our kids? What if you can't do both? My sister and I took care of our mother most of our lives. We were the parents and she was the child. I suppose that experience shaped who I am today, despite all the pain. As strange as it is to say, my relationship is better with my mother dead than alive. Forgiveness is so much easier when you no longer have to continue the work of truth and reconciliation. But I remember the moments, the kernels of connection we shared in my youth, the basic yet fundamental care she provided, the impact she made on her own work while fighting for underserved communities. I recognize now that she did love me, just not in the way I needed to be loved. And today, as I literally sweat through these fucking hot flashes, I so yearn to just pick up the phone and hear her wisdom. I can only imagine what she would say. I dream of what could have been, and I long for what wasn't. I hope I get it right, and this is motherhood.
I met our next storyteller at CKO cardio kickboxing class, where we get into shape, punching and kicking the crap out of bags, and imagine that we look like Linda Hamilton in Terminator 2. Lucky for me, there are no mirrors there. But today, Mousumi Bose is bringing that fighting spirit out of the gym to our stage with her piece, Ask Me About My Child.
My motherhood story is not one people get to hear often. Not because I don't want to tell it, nor do I think that people don't want to hear it. I think people are concerned that they might upset me if they ask me about it. My first son, Ilan, was born with a rare genetic disorder that was so severe that we were told he probably wouldn't make it past 6 months. Ilan died shortly after his first birthday on October 23rd, 2011. Now you might think with such a short life, there might not be much to say about Ilan, but I've got lots of stories. Some of these stories are similar to most new motherhood stories. We did a lot of cuddling with Ilan, we sang songs to him, we read, we danced, we took walks, we had family and friends stop by to see the new baby. Other stories are different. Some are pretty devastating. Not to say that I attribute these negative experiences to Ilan himself. Life with Ilan was amazing. I cherish every single moment that we had with him. But life with this disease, it was really hard. And it often drove you to complete and utter emotional breakdown. Instead of occupying ourselves with Ilan's sleeping, eating, and pooping patterns, we were monitoring daily seizures, oxygen levels. We were trying desperately to avoid hospitalization for another respiratory infection. Management of Ilan's disorder was a 24-hour gig. In fact, Someone needed to be up at least every 3 hours to flush out his tracheostomy tube because he couldn't breathe on his own. Every week was spent either seeing a slew of specialists or fighting with insurance companies that seemed to make arbitrary decisions as to whether or not something was medically necessary for Liane. The absurdity of it all was pervasive in everything. Nothing made sense. There was that time that I was convinced that singing Styx's Come Sail Away would make Liane's seizures stop because it worked that one time. Turns out, no matter how many times I'd belted out those famous beginning lyrics, it didn't actually work. Even more absurd was that time, as we were continually drowning in so many things to do, that we accidentally gave Liane 3 times the dose of one of his seizure medications, and as a result, he slept for 3 days straight. Now, I don't think I can fully explain to you the feeling of watching your terminally ill child, unable to be roused for days, thinking to yourself, wow, is this it? Is this the end? And did I do this? Is this my fault? He didn't have it bad enough, and here I am, helping him along towards this inevitable fate? Thankfully, it wasn't the end. Not then. But this was the only thing that I was thinking about until he woke up 3 days later. Even after Liane passed away, remnants of that absurdity remained. I remember taking our second son, born healthy, to a 6-month appointment, and our pediatrician thought that she had heard a heart murmur, so she referred us out to a cardiologist. And I'll tell you, my reaction to that wasn't that of your typically concerned mom wondering if there may be an issue. It wasn't even that of newly bereaved mom with all this perspective, knowing that this situation could be a lot worse because it had been, and I really should be taking this all into stride. No, my reaction was angry, bitter mom, pissed off that I had to subject another child to be poked and prodded by a bunch of medical specialists. Who the fuck decided that it was okay for us, after everything that we had been through, to have to go through this again? So, I realized that I needed help when I had this exact same reaction to my third son, also born healthy, when he was referred out to a dermatologist for his eczema. Clearly, there was some PTSD going on here, but this is the baggage that I've had to carry. I'll often hear people say things like, "How can anyone go on after losing a child?" Or, "It's unnatural for your children to go before you." I might have even said these things myself, so this is something that I do think about a lot. Because I am here. I'm going on. I'm mostly okay in spite of these experiences. I was a researcher before Liane was born, but since then my research focus has changed. Now, I study families that are affected by rare pediatric disorders. I try to understand what they need, what's important to them, and use that to think about ways to improve their lives, even if it's just in very small ways, even if their child's prognosis is similar to Liane's. And I would say, doing that has helped a little. I think if I were ever asked what I really needed to help me heal, I would probably say, my biggest fear is that Liane, given his short time here, he's going to be forgotten by the world. So I like to talk about him. And maybe that's how this career shift has helped me heal. I mean, I do get to start work every day thinking about Liane, talking about him. Liane has made this huge impact in my life, in my career. And while I would obviously just rather have him here with me, healthy, I am okay. I am going on. And I can do that because I found my way to honor my son every day. And I can't speak for other parents who have lost their child, but if you know someone who has, and you're concerned that if you bring up their child, you'll be reminding them of something upsetting, I assure you, we haven't forgotten. So, if you see me, please, ask me about my son. Let me tell you about all the amazing things that he's done during his life and after. And in that, you will have contributed so much to my ongoing healing journey, just as being here today has done.
In her role of rabbi at Temple Shari Tefillah, Israel, Allie Klein holds her congregation close to her proverbial bosom as a spiritual guide and educator. Today, Allie will metaphorically hold us all close to her bosom as she reads her story, The No-Show Boob Show.
So just to do some level setting, I would like to begin by establishing that these boobs are mine, attached to my body. While this might seem self-evident to all of you, it feels important to me to be really explicit about this because to my 3.5-year-old daughter, what I thought was a simple fact is apparently more of an up for debate, matter of opinion, open to vast interpretation. So just to reiterate, my boobs attached to me. Don't worry, this is not a convoluted lead-in to telling you that I still breastfeed my nearly 4-year-old kid. No judgment, but that was not my journey. And that said, for all of my relief when I stopped breastfeeding her at 6 months of age, declaring that I was finally getting my body back, I never anticipated that actually these boobs, according to my daughter, would be hers forever. It was relatively innocuous at first, her sweet little hands flipping inside my shirt during bedtime stories. Maybe she didn't even realize what she was doing. Then there was the one little finger poking me through the consecutive rungs of her toddler bed, seeming to survey the landscape of my chest, the very one, I would add, that I had selflessly, uncomfortably pressed against said rungs in the service of retrieving whatever stuffed animal she had accidentally dropped over the side of her bed. But the day that she said that she wanted to stay with me, when I changed out of my work clothes into my requisite evening athleisure, my misunderstanding about who these boobs belonged to became very, very clear. So I started to get undressed, striving for a modicum of modesty while also modeling a delicately crafted, Instagram-dictated pride in my tiger stripes and lumpy, bumpy postpartum body. I quickly swapped my blouse for a sweatshirt and removed my bra through my sleeve, a classic summer camp quick change technique. And when my daughter realized that my stealth tactics meant that she would not be able to take in all of this, she lost her damn mind. The hysterical waterworks were immediate, and she went from 0 to 60 screaming, "I want to see your boobs! Show me, Mommy! Show me your boobs!" So it was in this moment that I realized what I had naively thought was that innocent desire just to spend more time with me was actually a devious, carefully calculated plot aimed at survey and reconnaissance of the real thing that she'd been poking at through my shirt for all these years. Mommy had thwarted her plan, and she was not happy. And since that cataclysmic no-show boob show of 2022, we've closely gone back to sweeter, simpler groping. That little hand sneaking back into my shirt at story time, and the pokey finger topographic survey at her bedside. The truth is, though, it's okay,
Becoming a mom has meant that while, yes, I still maintain that these are my boobs attached to my body, I also accept that they are a source of comfort and curiosity for my daughter. We've got time to work on boundaries, and her future therapy savings account is growing by the day. But for now, take it in, sweetheart. They're all yours.
We love uplifting stories like Allie's. They provide us all with such fond memories.
As a college coach and admissions specialist, Christina Taber-Kewene spends a great deal of time helping high school seniors craft the perfect essay for their college application. It should come as no surprise that Christina is quite the essayist herself. Please welcome Christina as she reads her story, Blonde.
Sam lays a head on my shoulder. He towers over me, but his neck is long enough that he can nestle down to my collarbone if he slumps in his seat. He's like a baby giraffe, all arms and legs and those long lashes. I put my book down to stroke his hair as I gaze out of the train window to the deepening dark of the winter sky. We're quiet together as the train rumbles past the barren no-man's land between New York and the suburbs. When Sam came home from rehab last spring, he shaved his head down to stubble. Then he bleached what was left, and eventually he tired of what had grown out, and he dyed it back to his own chestnut brown. He looks like himself again, but his hair still has a few notes of blonde, and the bleach has robbed his hair of the baby softness it had before. We were on a train home together a year ago, too. We had tickets to see Dear Evan Hansen. That story of teen angst seemed just right to appeal to my oldest child. We shared a chicken hero on the street before the show and wiped tzatziki off our fingers as we dashed up to Midtown. The music that night wrung out our emotions. The script painfully apt as it moved from depression to self-harm to suicide. We were easy with each other that night, but Sam was not having a good year. His behavior was more mercurial than ever, and we rode the highs and lows with him as a family. The lows were so low, crying jags that seemed fathomless, unending. Two thoughts kept nagging me last winter. Get Sam's bedroom off the third floor and get him to rehab. The third floor, I understood. We'd grown increasingly uneasy about the isolation he had up there. We would shuffle the 4 kids around. But rehab, he'd had some occasional issues with nicotine and pot, one stupid Saturday night with vodka, but drugs were not his problem. No. Then one bleak Sunday morning, we got an anonymous text, and our whole world unraveled as we absorbed the knowledge that our child was deep into substance abuse. I spent the next days in a whirlwind of phone calls, consultations, negotiations with insurance. Friends and strangers were doing everything they could to help, but every time we thought we had a lead on an inpatient placement, it just slipped through our fingers. When we finally found a bed for Sam, I nearly wept. I'll never forget walking the neighborhood streets with him as he answered the intake questions over the phone. Yeah, the blue ones. And the white ones. Yes, those two. Most every day since last summer. It was time for him to go. Sometimes I can't believe we can do this again. Ride the train, talk. Now he straightens up and we trade photos from the Hopper exhibit we've just viewed at the Whitney, murmuring quietly about plans for college visits and the painting he's working on. Last year's togetherness held an undercurrent of worry, but now we're at peace. I covertly check his face one more time to make sure. When Sam left, we had a gaping wound in our family. We couldn't have any contact with him at first, but we tried to keep communication open with his younger siblings. I would put out a bag of candy and they'd come over. Sam's brother worships him quietly. He showed his anxiety through his questions. What's Sam doing during those meetings? Does he get to go outside the building? Will he still want to do drugs when he comes home? Our middle girl took us up on the offer to see the school counselor, and our youngest drew him pictures and needed a lot of extra hugs. A rogue therapist from the treatment center took a shine to him and started calling us every day, offering a glimpse of light in the darkness with her updates. She loved him the way I needed her to, like a mother. There are so many songs paying homage to romantic love. Mother and child, though. When I rested in bed 9 months pregnant with Sam and just sweating in the June heat, I whispered my greatest fear to my husband. What if I don't like him? My husband wasn't worried, but I come from a messier family than he does. When we had the baby, of course, I could have written 1,000 love songs about him. We eagerly anticipated Sam's return, but the next phase was the hardest. He was a stubborn teen who thought he could handle everything on his own. Outpatient treatment was redundant. AA was boring for old people. He wanted to be clean, but every cell in his body wanted to use. We bought him nicotine and coffee and formed a détente around the cigarettes. I kept feeling the image of an airplane going through riotous turbulence as it makes re-entry. We all held on to each other for dear life. Sam went back to his old friends, the real ones. He won an award for his art, and he tried to study for his classes. The head shaving even felt symbolic for a moment. He finally found a meeting he liked, and he chose one a long drive away, so he's getting his miles in for his license as he drives to AA and back. Recently, Sam had a moody week. Eventually, he confided that his roommate from rehab had died of an overdose. They had made a pact, that group. He's the only one left sober now. The chasm of death maws open beneath my feet again, and I try not to look down. Again. When we get off the train, it's dark, and we enjoy the evening calm as we walk down the hill and cross the field to our home. As we come in the door, Sam asks his dad to trim his hair. Our kids have an on-demand stylist, always ready to set up the stool and clippers in the basement. While I turn to dinner prep and the rest of the evening chores, the last blonde-tinged locks fall to the floor.
Samantha Grab is an educator and school administrator who is committed to progressive education. She is currently head of school at Weekday School in South Orange. Samantha is reading her piece, Amira.
You're having a girl. My midwife confirmed what I already knew in my bones. I burst into tears of joy. I'm gonna buy her so many outfits. If I'd had a girl first, I would have been all gender neutral about it, but after 2 boys, I grabbed every pink hair bow and sparkly shoe I could find. My inner riot girl was nowhere to be found. Instead of thinking of ways to fight the patriarchy, I dreamt of French braids and tulle dresses. I worried about how my 5-year-old son Avi would feel being the middle child after being the baby for so long, so I tasked him with picking out his sister's first outfit. He chose a pair of tiny blue pajamas covered in pink hearts. The hearts mean we love her. And it was true. When Amira Rachel was born, we all fell madly, deeply, head over heels in love. People had told me, your 3rd baby is going to be a breeze. And they were right. I'd done the newborn stage twice, so I was comfortable with it, which allowed me to enjoy the moments in a way I hadn't before. With my oldest, Kai, 7 years earlier, I was a scared and anxious first-time mom. I questioned myself and assumed I was doing things wrong. With Avi, 2 years later,
I had to learn how to take care of an infant and a toddler at the same time, each needing all of me in completely different ways. But with Amira, I'd found my stride. I knew that she'd eventually sleep through the night, that she'd soon be crawling. So I savored my time with her, long walks, nursing on the sofa, holding her all night. When my maternity leave ended, I returned to a job I loved, proudly showing off pictures of my girl, even when nobody asked. I pumped between meetings, constantly checking in with our beloved nanny, Lily. At night, I would cuddle with Amira, usually all night. And when morning came, I'd dress her in one of the outfits I'd bought her, nurse her, and head to work. On the afternoon of September 9th, my phone rang at work. It was my then-husband, Nia. It was a warm day, and bright rays of sunlight poured through my office window. The paramedics are at the house. Amira's not breathing. As I raced home, I waited for the phone to ring, for the words, "Everything is fine," but the phone didn't ring. When I pulled onto my block and saw several fire engines and police cars parked outside my house, icy coldness filled my body, a sharp, sickening fear I'd never known existed. I got out of my car and looked into the face of an officer waiting in my driveway. "Are you the mother?" he asked. I told him, "Yes, I'm the mother." He took me inside. In the kitchen, our nanny Lily was surrounded by cops. I went to wake Amira up from her nap so we could pick the boys up from school, and she was purple. As Nia and I headed towards the police car that would escort us to the hospital, I turned to an officer. "Is she dead?" "I'm not able to speak to that," he told me. At the hospital, they rushed us in. A nurse asked for my name and insurance information. "She's going to be okay," I reassured myself. A nurse wouldn't ask for my insurance information if my baby wasn't somehow going to be okay. When we finally saw Amira in the pediatric intensive care unit, her little body was covered in wires and hooked up to machines. I wanted to climb onto the table next to her and hold her close, like we would do every night. I put my finger into her tiny hand and waited for the familiar squeeze of her fingers, but her hand didn't move. I put my face close to her face, my cheek against her cheek. When every specialist and doctor determined that Amira had no brain activity, that she was only breathing because of the machines she was hooked up to, Nia and I made the decision to take her off of life support. Our sweet girl had been through enough. We had to let her go. When they disconnected the wires, I got to hold my daughter one last time as her breathing slowed and then eventually stopped. Her time of death was 12:34 p.m. Before we came home, my mother cleared our house of everything that had been Amira's. Her swing in the living room, her co-sleeper next to my spot on the bed, the swaddle blankets scattered around the house, and all those beautiful clothes. She had folded them carefully, packed them into plastic bins, and stashed them in the basement. My breasts were still producing milk and ached in constant pain. I hated my body for this betrayal, for not knowing that the baby wasn't here anymore. I refused to pump to relieve the pressure because seeing the milk was unbearable. I put cabbage leaves in my bra, took Motrin, white-knuckled it through the pain. It was a pain I had control over, unlike the aching pain of grief that had settled deep into my bones. Over 200 people came to Amira's funeral. The funeral home ran out of chairs, so people stood, spilling into the hallways. We chose to have her cremated, and we placed her ashes in a beautiful wooden box that we kept. I couldn't think of burying her because I didn't want her to be alone. I didn't want her to be out there by herself. 2 years after the autopsy results confirmed Amira had died from SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, I found myself in the basement rifling through her clothes. I pressed each item into my face and inhaled, desperate to smell her, to feel her close again. They smelled like the basement. I found the blue pajamas with pink hearts that Avi had picked out, her first outfit. I showed them to Avi, and he asked if he could dress his doll in them. He wanted to carry her with him. So together we dressed Avi's doll in Amira's pajamas. 2 of Amira's tiny outfits, a pink and white striped onesie and a pair of pajamas covered in elephants, now lay on my nightstand alongside her photo. The rest of her clothes, all of those cute matching outfits and sparkly shoes, remain in the basement. I can't part with them. They are a tangible reminder of my girl and of the mother I was to her for way too short a time, and the mother I will still be to her for the rest of my life.
How about a deep inhale? How about we take a cleansing breath together? Need a minute? Breathe in. And exhale. I know I feel better. Okay. Our next reader, Liane Stone Ingalls, is an educator, a performer, a singer, songwriter, and a poet. Today, Liane adds storyteller to her creative credentials as she reads The Black Hole of Parenthood.
The informal definition of a black hole is a place where people or things, especially money, disappear without trace. Now, if that's not the definition of motherhood, I don't know what is. I've been a mother for 28 years, and I have no idea where my money is. Black hole. No one told me it would be like this. Seriously. When I became pregnant for the first time, there were no, "This baby is gonna eat your money" warning labels on my maternity clothes or "Proceed with caution, economic disaster" in it, signs on the OBGYN's office door. My impression of motherhood was largely influenced by the lighthearted sitcoms of the 70s. Simple stories that culminated in neatly crafted familial reconciliations after manageable disagreements. Mike and Carol Brady had 6 kids. They never went broke. And they had Alice. It wasn't just my finances that succumbed to the lure of the parental black hole. No, that gravitational force meant business. It tugged on my mental health, my physical body, my social life. That pull was strong. And I was irritated about it. At my baby shower, none of the other mothers mentioned that an inevitable vacuum of supersized strength was headed my way. They just gave me adorable onesies. Like that would help. Of course, I'd heard other women joke about the sacrifices of raising kids, but no one sat me down and had a serious discussion about who I was, what I wanted, and what would happen to me after I became a mother. So, it was easy for me to get caught up in what I thought motherhood would be. I fawned over cute baby pictures, inhaled the scent of Johnson & Johnson, and experienced the fuzzy feelings that came along with holding my new little baby. There I was, desperately in love with my child and victim to my nesting instinct. I was a goner. The black hole was at my front door. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want you thinking, yikes, she sounds like she's an entree of bitterness with a side of regret. Because I'm not. Though, if I'm being honest, I do have some simmering bitterness and regret. Though surprisingly, those feelings aren't because motherhood has left me without an enviable retirement plan, No, the black hole actually digs deeper than all that. First, let me say that I love my 3 children beyond words. They are the source of my greatest joy and the greatest gift for which God has entrusted me. They are incredible human beings on every level. I look at them and wonder, where the heck did these folks come from? These adult, opinionated, compassionate, and complex human beings, where did they come from? From me? I'm still in awe. Yet here's where the bitterness and regret abide. While I was busy raising 3 children and warding off that overwhelming and unexpected financial, emotional, physical, and social black hole, I inadvertently left my children unprotected. I wish the trauma from my own childhood had empowered me to ensure that no trauma befell my own children, but that's not my story. I wasn't able to protect them from bullies, sexual predators, or the familiar systemic racism that made them question their worth because of their complexion. While I was trying to pay bills, I fell short of what my beautiful brown children needed in this often loveless world. And I regret that. I regret being so paralyzed by my own black hole-induced depression and anxiety that I didn't give them what they needed emotionally. I know my own shortcomings have contributed to the trauma they've suffered in their lives. And as a result, my greatest joy is tinged with the stain of my deepest despair. To me, that is the true cost of the black hole of motherhood. It's not really the money, though I have been sucked dry. It's not my stomach muscle, though those are nowhere to be seen. It's not my hair color or my mental health. Yay for meds. It's not even my feelings of incompetence. It is the long-term effect on my children. I felt so blindsided by that black hole that I failed to recognize the light that my 3 children were shining down on me. They're grown now, and I see myself better in their shadows. A beautifully flawed woman who loves with her whole heart and has done the best that she could to love, prepare, and release her children into this world to make it a better place, which they all have done and continue to do. And while no one told me in advance about the trials and pitfalls of this parenting experience, they also never told me about the triumphs. And to see my children grown and fine, that is a triumph that no black hole is strong enough to pull away.
From K-holes to black holes, so many holes, so little time. Rachel Shapiro Cooper is an arts educator and arts administrator. Rachel is the director of theater at Newark Academy and director of education at Luna Stage. Suffice it to say, she knows her way around a stage and can teach us all a thing or two about performance and the arts. Rachel is taking center stage today with a different kind of lesson as she reads her story, Take a Seat.
I woke and realized I was covered in my own sweat. The moment that my mind regained consciousness, things began to make sense. First, slowly, and then fast, and then all at the same time. I began to smell my youngest daughter's sweet scent and feel her soft skin. A vibrating pound on my upper right temple. How did I get here again? I frantically checked my phone. No wreckage today, thank goodness. Nothing to tidy up. And then I heard noise from the bathroom. My husband was moving around in there. He came out and asked me if I was okay, and I said, yes, of course. And then he mentioned that he tried to wake me up last night. A sinking and familiar feeling rushed over me, and I knew the truth that I didn't want to know. I missed her birthday. My eldest daughter's. I missed the super special once-in-a-lifetime meal our sitter's mother had made us from across the globe. I must have gotten myself to bed while drunk, and somehow the little one and I must have had a conversation that landed her in bed with me. And I knew all of this, and at the same moment, I also knew that I couldn't tell my husband any of that, because how can you tell someone that and hope that they will ever look at you with confidence again? I pulled myself out from underneath my daughter and slipped into my bathroom, my heart racing, my body clearly fighting between trying to get the booze out of my pores and trying to keep me upright. I heard the sounds of life downstairs on the floors beneath me, the sweet little voices with innocent laughter, the opening and closing of cabinets. I stood there for a few moments in my robe and looked around the room, reminded of the familiarity of this feeling of hopelessness and shame and, well, dread. I looked for the most comfortable clothing that I could find that would hold me in on this day. I put my hoops on, which always made me feel connected to a self I once knew, though at this point, that girl from the streets of Queens was such a phantom, I didn't know if she was ever really real at all. Still, wearing them calmed me some. Now, what happened next, I can't explain. I was called to sit, and so I did. On my bed, I then slid down the side of my bed till my ass met the cold, hard floor, and then, without explanation or provocation, I closed my eyes, dropped my head, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, I prayed. I breathed in and out for a few moments, and then I quite literally asked God for help. Help me. And then a quiet voice, one I had never heard before, came through, and it said, "It's time to put it down, Rach." And with that, I knew it had to be true, because it wasn't rushed, it wasn't strained, the voice didn't sound like me. It had no ego, no tinge, no tone. It was pure. I went downstairs, and my eldest daughter asked me why I missed her party, and I said I wasn't feeling well, and I was sorry. And sorry was enough for her sweet little 9-year-old self to be able to move on. But she knew that whatever it was that took me away from her, it was more important than her. Whatever I told her didn't matter, because children know. What's worse is that I could feel in that moment this subtle imprinting of her recognition that something was not right with her mama. And it broke my heart. I missed so much that night. And the truth is that there have been many moments like those over the years. There had been many moments where I betrayed what was best for my daughters in service of my addictions and doing what felt good to me. I felt so overwhelmed by the desire to manipulate my emotions that literally nothing else was more important than that. Nothing. Not even my daughters. I wish that I could say that that was it, and I stopped drinking and my life got better, and I never made another memory with myself or my daughters that I regretted again. But like most things, time takes time. It took me a while. It took me a good long while, with many fits and starts. Freedom is something I have wanted my whole life. That feeling of being at ease with myself and the world around me without the overwhelming desire to abandon myself. I always felt the world wasn't built for me, that I somehow was too much, felt too much, did too much. Everything about me was overflowing, and I needed to button it up just to survive, to make it through each day. But inside of me, there was a knowing that I was a prisoner in my own life, tied closely to the shackles of resentment and seeming contentedness. Because when I put down this thing, I made space for my life, my truth. I made way for myself. And while it wasn't easy, It was unlike anything I have ever experienced, and isn't that something? I often wonder why I sank to the floor that morning after my daughter's very special birthday, having woke in a pool of my own sweat. Why this barely Jewish girl suddenly had the call to pray of all things. I don't know exactly why. But I do know that what I was telling myself I needed to keep standing for, I didn't. It was time to take a seat.
In addition to being our favorite senior softball player and grandfather in the cast, Ken Murray is a storytelling pro, having won 2 Moth Story Slams. You will soon become a fan of Ken's as well, as he reads you all his story, Dreaming.
At the tender age of 7, your mom's not supposed to be a memory. Caitlin was 10, and my son Casey was 7. It's been a couple of months since their mom and my wife, Celeste, passed away at 40 after fighting breast cancer for 2.5 years. It's later in the evening. I enter our bathroom and yell out, "Let's move it! Out of the shower, it's getting late." I hear the water shut off. The white vinyl curtain slowly slides to one side. Casey steps out of the shower, and I grab a towel. I quickly rub his head and wrap the towel around him. "Casey, I've got to go downstairs and finish cleaning the kitchen, finish up in here, and then get to bed. I'll be back up soon, okay?" Casey nods his head and asks, "Can I have a dream tonight?" I respond, "Let's see what time it is." A dream in our house happens when you're still awake. When Celeste and I put our kids to bed, we would always talk to them for a while, and on some nights we would give them a dream, our version of a bedtime story. A dream could be a real story about something we did, like a day at Disney World, or collecting sand crabs on the beach at LBI and then dumping out a bucket of them all at once. A dream could also be something silly, totally made up, like building slides from our attic that connected to Casey's friends' homes so he could jump in and slide to play with them. I grab a towel and wipe the steam off the mirror so the little guy can brush his teeth, comb his hair. I go downstairs to clean the kitchen. Soon I'm back upstairs. My good little son is in bed. The blanket sits right up to his chin. His hair is perfectly combed. He looks like he's ready for his first communion picture. I lay down beside him. He smells like ivory soap. He again asks, "Can I have a dream?" I say, "Sure, let me think for a minute." As I'm contemplating whether to revive an old dream or make up a new one, Casey's face takes a serious look. And, without sadness, he says, "Dad, I'm having trouble remembering Mom's voice." Wow. I'm stunned. I don't know what to say. I wasn't prepared for that. My heart breaks for my boy. Mom's voice. That should be the sound that starts and ends every 7-year-old's day. Now, I have to say something. But what? Then it hits me. To Casey, I say, "I'll be right back. Don't move." I go into my bedroom, my night table, bottom drawer, find what I'm looking for. Need a couple of minutes to get it ready. I climb back into bed next to Casey. I tell him, "All right, close your eyes. Don't say anything. Keep them closed." He closes them. I press the play button. The next sound Casey hears is his mom's voice. "And I was flying the plane when you shouted out and you saw a big rainbow. So I steered the plane and flew right through it." Casey's eyes flew open. He had that Christmas morning smile on his face. He looks at me. "That's Mom telling me the rainbow dream," he says. "I love this one. She told me this a lot." Together we listened to Celeste continue. "After you flew through the rainbow, I looked at you, and your face was green. and had blue and yellow stripes on your shirt. And you yelled at me my face was orange. She goes on. About 5 months before Celeste had recorded that dream for Casey, her breast cancer had migrated to her spinal fluid. We both knew it was the beginning of the end. Our dream was one more Christmas together. Celeste and I had many difficult conversations throughout her illness, but they became much tougher now. Instead of shielding our kids from reality, we now talked about how to prepare them for what was inevitable. The absolute worst talks were about how our kids would remember Celeste as they got older. It killed them to know she would not see her kids grow up, graduate high school, get married, have her grandchildren. To create lasting memories, Celeste decided to carry a small tape recorder into our kids' bedrooms and recording her voice as she told them dreams. I will never comprehend how difficult this must have been for her, to tell a dream with a smile on her face, and as she hit record, to save her voice for when she was gone. Celeste was tough, and she loved our kids so much, she would do anything for them. We never did get that last Christmas together. Celeste finished up Casey's dream with, and when we got home, we both had to take a shower to wash off all the colors, and I had to put all our clothes in the washing machine. The end. Good night, Casey. I love you. Casey went to sleep that night with a smile on his face. 7 months ago, I became a grandfather. My son and his wife, Tina, welcomed little Kennedy Celeste. I know that soon Casey will be creating dreams for his own daughter as he puts her to sleep. When she gets a little older, there will be a special night they will both remember when Kennedy Celeste hears the voice of the grandmother she will never meet tell her father the rainbow dream. Thank you, Celeste.
How are you doing? Okay? One more breath? I know. It's okay. We're good. Our final reader, C.J. Prince, is the founder and executive director of North Jersey Pride and hopes to see us all at one of the many Pride events in June, including Pride Fest in Memorial Park in Maplewood on June 11th. CJ was also in our very first Listen to Your Mother cast with a story about taking her breast pump on the road. Today, however, she drives us back to her own childhood in her piece, A Mother Knows.
When I was 8 years old, my mother helped me write my first love letter. It was to my cousin Stephen's new fiancée, Joanne, whom I had met the day before at my aunt's house in Long Island. She'd worn a pink cashmere sweater with black pants and super high heels. Her light brown hair, which she let me play with, fell in delicate ringlets around her face. She smiled a lot, and when she did, her green eyes almost disappeared. And Joanne was as pretty as she was nice. Was as nice as she was pretty, letting me sit on her lap at the dining room table, which my mother didn't seem to like, but which I felt I could get away with because I was small for my age. I loved the way the soft fuzz of her sweater tickled the backs of my arms when she reached for her Sanka. I admired the perfect semicircle of her hot pink lipstick on the outer rim of the coffee cup. She was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. On the car ride home, I asked my mother when we would see them again. At the wedding, she told me, in June. I counted on my hand. 8 months? She'd probably forget all about me by then. So the next morning, I popped in my favorite Air Supply tape and sat down to write her a letter. Dear Joanne, I love you. You're so pretty, like a movie star. Your hair is very shiny, and you smell good. What shampoo do you use? I use Curve. Can you visit my house? I will show you my collection of G.I. Joes. I don't let anyone play with them, but you can. I am learning to play the piano. Maybe I'll write you a song. I love you very, very, very much. Love, your future cousin, Cheryl Joy Prince. P.S. If Stephen ever does not want to be married, I will marry you. I drew a picture of us holding hands and included a Dum Dum cherry lollipop in the envelope. Then I went to find my mother to ask for a stamp. She asked who the letter was for. I told her it was for Joanne. Well, that's very sweet, honey. Can I see it? I proudly handed it over. As she read it, I waited for her to gush over my perfect penmanship and my use of long sentences. Instead, her eyebrows furrowed, and she peered at me over the tops of her reading glasses. She seemed to be mulling something very important. Today, I recognized that look for what it must have been. A deep sense of knowing she had about me, that perhaps we all, as mothers, have about our children. A primitive, unspoken way of sizing up their difference and scanning for all the possible ways they might not fit. Because if we can find them, maybe we can fix them before anyone else sees them. My mother had been trying to do this since birth, steering me toward dolls and dresses, ponytails and pink ruffles, but every passing year seemed to reveal another dimension to my otherness. My mother knew my failure to conform to the rules of our Orthodox Jewish community would eventually lead to rejection and isolation. Like a reluctant oracle, she could see, or maybe just sense, the coming train wreck of my adolescence, and at every turn seemed to be trying to frantically untie me from the tracks. To my mother, who may not have always liked me, but who loved me fiercely, that letter was just one more piece of damning evidence. So she did what she had to do. She buried it. Sweetie, we can't send this letter. Why not? It's a little much. A little much of what? It's just not appropriate for a cousin. It's okay. I'll help you write a new one. But what was wrong with this one? I snatched it back and scanned it for spelling errors and grammatical gaffes. Nothing. It was perfect. But she was already turning her notebook to a fresh sheet of paper, and she read aloud as she wrote, "Dear Joanne, it was very nice to meet you. We are so happy you are joining our family. Did you know I am in the 3rd grade? I like reading and jump rope. How is the weather there? It was very mild here today. See you at the wedding. Regards, Cheryl Joy Prince." "Here," she said as she handed it back to me. "Now you go copy that in your handwriting and I'll mail it for you." "But I don't like jumping rope." "That's okay, she doesn't know that." "But is the weather really different in Long Island?" "That's just something people say. Go on now." I still didn't get it, but I also knew she had the stamps and Joanne's address, so I didn't have much of a choice. I copied her version and we sent it off. I checked the mailbox every day when I got home from school. Finally, a week later, it arrived, a small pink envelope with matching stationery and words written in beautiful swirly script. "Dear Cheryl Joy, it was so nice to hear from you, and it was great meeting your family. I'm so excited to be part of the clan," smiley face. "How is 3rd grade? It must be a lot of fun. The weather is mild here, too. We can't wait to see you at the wedding. Regards, Joanne." I read it, and I read it again, analyzing every word. It sounded a lot like the one my mother wrote for me. A lot. Then it all became clear. I realized Joanne must have written a different letter too, but my cousin Stephen told her she couldn't send it because it wasn't appropriate. That made me feel much, much better. It was only after having my daughters that I really got it, that impulse to shield my child from pain, only to realize later, with no small amount of bewilderment, that I had instead contributed to it, or even been the cause. I never got the chance to tell my mother that because she died of breast cancer 18 months before I became a mother myself, but I did at least have the chance to come out to her when I was 27 and could no longer tolerate the distance that more than a decade of lies had put between us.
After sitting with her for the better part of an hour, trying and failing to free the words caught in my throat, my mother finally put a warm hand over mine and said, "Sweetie, just say it." "I'm gay," I said. She squeezed my hand tighter and said, "I know."
And this is our love story, our love letter to you all. We are very honored to curate our community stories year after year, and we are grateful to you, our audience, for filling our seats and supporting incredible writers. A few words of thanks. Sandy, Brooke, and I must express our gratitude to Stacy, Ross, Trevor at the Woodland, and the staff at the Woodland for their support and very hard work behind the scenes. Also, thank you very much to our volunteers who helped make your experience as special as possible. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you. To our stage manager, Sharon Michaels, for lovingly keeping everyone in line and everything running smoothly. Behind the scenes. And to our spouses, Gabriella, Matt, and Evan, who do too many things for us to mention, though I'm sure they'll mention every single one of them tonight. We love you very much. A special thanks, yes, applaud for them too. A special thanks to Lorelei, Jacobs Martinez, and Stephanie Kaniski for signing our show so beautiful. Do I take this one? No, oh wait, okay. Can I please have all the readers come to the front of the stage? Sure they are. I want to thank you all, our cast, for kicking off our Mother's Day weekend in the best possible way. Everyone has a story, but not everyone gets up and shares it in a microphone in front of hundreds of people. So thank you for your courage and your generosity. I need to recognize a few people in our audience today. If anybody has been an alumni of the Listen to Your Mother cast, you must stand. We know where you are. Oh, so nice to see you. Please ask them what their stories were about later if you see them. We would not have an abundance of stories to choose from or sold out shows year on year if it weren't for your brilliant stories and continued support. So we encourage you all to ask them about their stories. Thank you very much. I do want to make a quick correction. Our apologies for wrongly labeling our valued sponsor, real estate agent Allison Ziepert, whose team is with Compass Realty. Compass Realty. Thank you, Allison. I was so sorry. All right. So, thinking about the story that you would tell on this stage, please put your thoughts on paper or the screen. Share your experience today with other parents, other writers, and think about auditioning. We hope to see all of you either on our stage or in our audience next year. And please take a moment to visit our sponsor tables on the way out. And Dean Abramson is doing a giveaway with her beautiful, beautiful selection of jewelry. Please take a look and submit your names. And thank you all for coming, and happy Mother's Day to everyone.